Hi, I'm Seamless, and today I'm going to show you how to make this sound in a track I'm working on. It's going to be this guy, represented by this MIDI, and it's kind of loud. I'm going to play it in 3, 2, 1. I let that keep playing because another video I'm going to do soon is how to quick and dirty synthesize a fake orchestra, because that was a synthesized fake orchestra. Anyway, this guy is represented by this dude, and this is all he is. He has one Sytrus, one Vocodex, and a Maximus. Then he's mixed by the EQ going on in the mixer, and then he's processed by the mix going on in the master. Yeah. Whoop. So the main thing about this sound that's super awesome is really just that the entire tone is being created by the application of Unison and the distortion going on. The Vocodex is doing almost nothing. Here's what it sounds like without the Vocodex. Actually, here's what it sounds like with the Vocodex and soloed. And then here's what it sounds like without the Vocodex. Here's what it sounds like without the Unison. Here's what it sounds like without the filter or the sub-reinforcement. It is a filtered saw wave. So let's get into how this works. This saw wave is created when you do anything with any shape, and then you engage this parameter here. By default, it's all the way up, and then this is essentially an additive filter. This is reprocessing the waveform and removing harmonics. The benefit of this is that it is completely linear phase. It is not an actual filter, but it does have the result of removing the harmonics. You can actually see the math going on up there when I'm doing it. But the value of this in this example is that I am using a kind of distortion that is akin to sine shaping. You can kind of see it's still pretty siny. It's just most sine shapers have like even representation of the wave of the sines in series and whatnot, and this is me more just kind of experimenting with whatever. The benefit of doing this kind of sharpness is that it will take those higher harmonics and then kind of FM them. That's why sine shaping is kind of neat. It basically imparts an extra frequency onto something, and it will do that on an oscillation basis. So it'll put that extra frequency on the whole of the saw wave here, but it also does it on every one of these little dudes here. If these guys get pushed high enough up there, and if the shape is fine enough to be articulated by the amplitude change. And that results in what a lot of like how like acid sounds the way it does when you put a really high resonance low pass filter into a distortion, and those harmonics that were just from originally that individual peak become a spread kind of acidy texture, and we're taking advantage of that. And then I'm also applying onto it this filtering high pass going on up here, and here's the triangle wave. So this is basically a bandpass kind of like tone going on. You saw it happening up there with the filter on the low end doing its thing with its motion, and then the pre-filter occurring that is note following. So when there are higher notes going on, it moves around with it. And that saves it from sounding like a kind of staticky sampled thing, or actually kind of the opposite of that, where like the filter and the main tone doesn't really move very much. It makes it like anytime you can make a kind of form of quality move like that, but not like, I don't know, too conspicuously, it helps make it feel more complex, but not like a kind of trashy. I don't know. That's a really hard thing for me to describe right there, because I'm pretty sure what I'm describing is a personal problem. Anyway, with the distortion, yeah. So that is what the sound sounds like, and then with this guy here, and then we use the Unison. The reason why this is at last here is because I do not have this engaged. What this does is it changes between the unison being only in the actual generation of the sound, which is to say that I could have my 5 voices on oscillator 1 here, oscillator, and then the 1 filter, and then when it's off, it does the whole shebang. So that means that there's one voice of the saw wave, 1 voice of the filter with 1 voice of the unison. When there's 5 voices of the saw wave going into 5 voices of the distortion. So all of those different pitched, like the phase cancellation due to different pitch is happening after the distortion, which is why we're still able to get like a kind of smoothness out of it. Because typically, when you see me do this kind of thing, you're watching me usually put a wave shaper in post where the distortion isn't happening here, but then like the unison sound would get distorted after the fact, and that would have a very different result. That would have like it's still distorting and it's still moving, but we are basically losing entirely all of the higher frequency texture out of that because it's overpowered completely by the lower frequency stuff. That's just what happens when you combine signals into distortion units like that. But because of the unison structure inside Sytrus, there's 5 different distortion modules right now running parallel to each other, not interacting like that. I'm also automating the amplitude. Main mod X is actually main mod Xing out of this guy. This is why I like to use this guy, because not every parameter can be linked to whatever internal thing is there, and this guy can just link to whatever external thing there is, and that solves that problem completely. Operator 1 is just straight linear X is X kind of thing, and then this one is me modulating the amplitude. It's also why this is good, because I don't have to have the same profile for every link. And while that's true for regular automation linking in the controller linking window, this is just way easier and visual. So that's why amplitude is being modulated. Amplitude is being modulated because the higher level it is, the more of this shape gets used, and the more of these pieces of frequency end up like in the waveform. And if you change the level while it's occurring, you get a modulation in the tone. And that's affected by level. And all of the things that we're doing here affect level heavily. And so that means it's all adding up to being not necessarily completely in my control, the modulation, but I guess there's a word, procedural? That's not the word, but man, one day I'll figure it out. Anyway, that's that part of the sound. And then here comes Vocodex. The only thing really special I'm doing in here is I'm using Vocodex Unison. Vocodex Unison is weird because there's an internal pitch control. And what the internal pitch control does is it doesn't actually change anything's pitch, but it moves down the spectrum the spectral activity. So when it detects activity in 1K or whatever, you move the pitch down, it's actually imparting that on the bands that are lower than that, making it seem like the modulator is lower in pitch, without actually lowering the modulator's pitch, because in this case, the modulator and the carrier are the same signal. So what this does, though, is that it creates a kind of neat texture most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. And what the Unison does is, like regular Unison, it changes, it detunes 2 more or a couple of voices. It creates another voice of this, and then the other one will have a higher or lower pitch application, rather. And that is Vocodex Unison. It has a little bit of spread, not a lot, and it's just there to be extra texture. Extra texture. My strategy for using Vocodex most of the time is just to come on, tweak this, tweak that, feel where a middle ground kind of sounds good, maybe move this guy. This just makes a pretty big change, and like this one's less Vocody, this one's more Vocody. Pick a number of voices, how many bands there are, and that's just super arbitrary. Like all of this is so very arbitrary. And then moving with this guy. So what this does is that it changes, like once you're satisfied with whatever you got going on up here, these bands, these menus like in Harmor, change that value per band. It has a pretty big impact on tone when you start to change the rigidity of a particular parameter in a spectral sense. Like this. And then I'm doing the same for the modulator pitch shift. So this does what I just described up here, but it does it on a per band basis. It can move individual bands, pitch information around. And then actually moving individual bands around physically, because again, that doesn't actually move the bands. It just moves where the activity gets represented in what band. This actually moves bands. And this is a bit difficult to look at, but you can think of this as being a sideways graph. The bars represent, the individual voices, but the actual frequency count is up here on the sides. And you can think, so here's low frequency, high, mid frequency, and high frequency. And this is telling us, this line is representing the range in which the bands can exist. Right now, that means that this is 151 hertz, and this is 20,000 hertz. So when we come back up here to gain, you can see, oh, look at that. There's no band below 100 hertz. However, this isn't really it's not quite like the pitched thing, because what this is doing is it's saying that there would have been bands down here, but those bands' activity aren't being moved up. In fact, all of the bands' activity are being moved up when we're doing it like this. This is like saying that the bands is straight up moving the band, though. It's not actually moving like the band activity. The whole band itself is being moved. And when you move it like that and you move it outside of its rigid, already even position, that has an effect on the tone. In the case of this sound, Vocodex honestly is just a very light texture application, because almost all of the actual modulation is already there. It's really hard to tell in some parts of the sound that anything's even happening at all. But it does mix well with the way that I mixed all of this with the Vocodex on. I probably could have if I tried to not live without it, and have this one here, because this is where all the cool stuff from the sound is coming from, straight up. But especially lower dudes like these guys, that guy, that Vocodex has a pretty positive impact on those. See what I mean? But yeah, that's this sound. The main dude, what is this? Voice MIDI input? Oh yeah, I'm automating this with the automation clip. Cool. And then this was for something else completely. Automating that, and then yeah. So that's what this sound is primarily doing. The main mod X is the amplitude and the high pass, and then the phase change is really what's causing this to work out in the Unison. So let's get back to that. In Unison, we were talking about the individual voice count or whatever, and the thing that's making the sound kind of change any amount, it sounds like in the past this would have been 3 or 4 sounds for me, because it really wouldn't have thought. It wouldn't occur to me to actually just straight up modulate this parameter. And it's because when you're playing a note, when you're moving it around, it doesn't actually change the position of the phase while you're playing it. It changes where the phase starts. So let's take that really nice little dive, dude. So what's going on here, there's also side chaining going on, is that this dude started pretty low phase, because this is where the phase left off. This is what it would sound like if it had high phase. We basically just switch places, like high phase, high guy. See how that ends up working out? And that is entirely because we are changing the phase spread of the Unison in here, which is again post distortion, and so it's causing the tone is being that tone anyway, because we're also getting tone from the high pass filter or whatever, but the kind of phasery result from the phase cancellation is being altered by where the phase starts, and we have control of that, and that's what's up. So that's pretty much the secret sauce of this sound, is using the pre-filter to create a kind of bandpassy reality that's going to get distorted with a sine shapery thing that gets unisoned with a number of voices. This sounds fine with 5 voices, but much like if you use any kind of phasers, how many orders and positive amounts and whatever, how many voices there are changes the density of the phase cancellation, which changes the density of the phaser result. So you would have to automate higher or lower if you wanted a related tone in a result there. And this is all just very similarly arbitrary kind of testing errors or whatever. And you could even automate this if you felt like it, how many voices you had. And that's where this sound gets its deal. Anyway, I'm going to put up this dude as a download in the description in this video. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.